Well, hello, guys. Thanks for joining us. Um, I'm happy to see everybody here. I hope everybody had a great time over the Christmas holiday, and looking forward to New Year's.
I'm happy to see everybody here. I hope it.
Uh, Hold on, I have got to go mute YouTube.
We're good.
Okay. All right, better. Now I won't be getting feedback and listening to myself speak. All right, well, and it looks like we've got several people from all over the country. Debbie's here from England, and Kevin is here from Utah. I'm in San Diego, locked down solid. We were just told that we're getting an indefinite lockdown, so I may be building props here for a while. Miles is our moderator tonight. Miles is coming to us from St. Louis.
Howdy.
And so he is going to be fielding the questions. And the idea for tonight, I know many of you guys have been to my presentations, to my, Trans World and some of the other conventions. I would rather not have this be just me teaching. I would rather have this be more of a discussion tonight. So we please ask your questions. No matter what you think, if it's everybody should know it, but you don't, then it's still a good question. The idea tonight, I've done a lot of videos on my characters and how I build them and how we program them and everything, and we still get a lot of comments from people saying, "Oh, it really looks great. Wish I had one. Wish I knew how to do that, but it's way beyond me. I can't do it, so I never will." And my goal here is to try and demystify this a little bit, and encourage you to try some of this stuff. It's not as difficult as it was 5 years ago. We've made a lot of advancements. There's a lot of advancements in the technology for the programming, for the building, all of that. It's entirely different than it was when I got started. And we're going to talk about a lot of ways that you can make this. And really, once you see this, I think anybody can do this. Maybe not jumping in and building characters to this extent. And, budget wise too, you may want to, start simple. And, if you're just getting into animatronics and you're still not even, sure you want to get into servos, but you want to do something and you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do that. I think there's 150 videos or something over there, close to that, detailing all sorts of builds, pneumatic builds, motor builds, servo builds, all sorts of stuff. So please go check that out. Also, I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Sometimes things get posted over there that I don't post anywhere else. I do a lot of progress pictures over there. So you might find that handy. And also, you can see scrolling across the bottom of the screen is the website. So, please go check that out. We've got some tutorials over there, some things that aren't listed anywhere else. So you might find that helpful.
And then the part list from tonight is also listed on there as well. If someone needs that to download that.
We have parts list for both of these, and we'll get into the differences over there to kind of get you started. Don't be afraid when you look at the parts list. Again, it's for building complete things. So I just wanted to put those out there. And then for those of you that are on Facebook, I have my DIY animatronics page, my personal page, and Miles and I also have a moderated group page, DIY animatronics. And that's a wonderful place to go and ask questions, see, get inspired by what other people are doing, and get some help, because no matter what you're doing on this, if you're starting to push the envelope, it always helps to have somebody to look for, towards for help. Miles and I have a video chat that we've been meeting on Wednesday nights for, I don't know, 8 or 10 years. And I mean, I asked a question of the group last week and got a lot of good, information and ideas from, 8 or 10 different guys about, their thoughts on how to solve a problem. So, we don't know it all, and we're always looking for new ways and trying to figure things out for ourselves as well. So with that, let's get started. And any questions, Miles, that I need to jump on right away?
Not yet.
Okay. Are the videos numbered? Yes, Dano, they're numbered. There's 287 of them. Inside joke there, guys. But all right, I am going to switch to my full screen here, and we're going to take a look. These are two of my characters. This one is built with the components from Servo City. They're the Actobotics components. And again, he's traveled with me to many conventions. And it looks a little weird, this head on. We're going to talk about some different ways to make animated heads. This happens to be my design for when I'm putting a mask on a character. We do that a lot, where you don't want to do a skull, but you've got a really cool witch's mask or something, and you want to put it on a 3-axis mechanism. This is my framework that I would use for a mask. And of course, it's 3-axis and it's talking. So I would attach the jaw to this wood piece here, and usually put some foam backing out to fill the mask out. And that's the method that I would use for a 3-axis skull for a mask. You can use the standard 3-axis skull mechanisms. Monster Guts has had one. We're having difficulties right now getting them because the Lindbergh skulls that everybody was using are no longer produced. So there's people saying that we might be seeing those come back, and we're working on some other options for maybe bringing back a standard 3-axis skull. But if you've got one of those, we sure can use that, and we'll talk about integrating that. This design, let's see if I can kind of tilt him, and is a new one for me. If you're not familiar with the Stan Winston School of Character Arts, that's another place I recommend you go look at. They're primarily professional Imagineers, animatronic builders, sculptors, painters that work more in the professional field, but they certainly do accept us. And they've got a plethora of videos over there. Now, you have to pay for their videos, but there's a ton of great information. I own probably 10 of them, the CDs, plus I pay for the monthly service that I can get 4 videos a month. And but this is a mechanism that they just had a class on, and I built this, and it's a little bit of a different thing, but this character is going to be steampunk, so it works out that this is the perfect thing. I want to show this off. I'm not going to try and hide this mechanism because it is bulkier and stuff than a standard 3-axis mechanism. But for this particular character, it's going to work out really good. But you can check that out over there again on Stan Winston School of Character Arts page. What else? We're going to talk a little bit different. This is Go Build Up, which is a new line by the Servo City guys, mainly made for the big robotics and the STEM programs. And we'll talk about the differences between the two. But again, Actobotics from Servo City, and the Go Builda line, GOBILDA.com is the Go Builda. We'll talk about the differences and why I use which one. Any questions, Miles? Anybody? If there's no questions, they should be teaching. Oh, you're muted. Come on, guys.
How's the new book coming?
Oh, the new book? This guy's going to be in the new book. That's why I'm building him. It's coming. I'm not writing as much as I should, but I'm building a bunch. I don't know if you guys saw the Tiki Drummer that came out right before Christmas, but that also is a project for the new book. And for those that haven't seen it or don't know, this is my book. We had a great Christmas, and everyone sold out, including the publisher. So that was kind of cool, but a little disappointing that some people missed out on the Christmas present.
Is there any kind of time frame on the book being published?
I got an email from my publisher today that hopefully they took a 2-week vacation for Christmas, which they didn't tell us about. But hopefully end of next week, they should be shipping to my publisher. And once they get them, they'll get out to Amazon and Addacore. If anybody's interested, the best place to get those is from Addacore, ADDICORE, because they offer free shipping. So that saves you $9 over what Amazon does. So that's a killer deal. And we're going to talk more about Addacore because they're my good buddies over there. And I think for those of you that are familiar, we're going to talk more about control systems. But those of you that may have questions for Addacore, Andre is on tonight from Addacore. And so if you have something that you want to ask Andre, he's around. And also they have a special thing just for tonight, just for you guys, 10% off at Addacore until midnight tomorrow. So I think Miles will put that link up, and we'll talk more about Addacore when we get controller part of it. So let's talk a little bit about process and what I go through when I'm starting to design these things. And again, these things look really complex and really complicated, and they really are not anymore. I've been doing this a long time, and I used to build all of this stuff in my garage, weld and cut and bolt and drill and everything, all my components. And then I got involved with the stuff from Servo City, the Actibotics, and I have fallen in love with this stuff. It's not the cheapest way to go, but the aggravation and the time that it saves me is well worth every penny I spend on it. So when you're just getting started, you of course do not have to go into this much detail. This project that we're going to talk about a little bit later, the Go Builda one, this character is actually going to be 14 or 15 servos, 2 speaking parts, characters, and of those 15, a couple of them will be linear actuators. So, you don't have to go that far. You can start out and just put one in the shoulder to have an arm move side to side to get your feet wet and to test the system and see if it's something you like to do. And then if it's something you really want to do, you can start expanding on it. These characters, this arm especially, has got 2 servos in the elbow or in the shoulder, one to give rotation, one to give lift, another one in the elbow, and then the secret component. Oh, that's on my finger. Secret component is an electromagnet up under here, one of my favorite little secrets. So we'll talk about that in a little bit too. But when you start out with this, again, there's the mechanical part of this, and then there's the electronics part of this, and then there's the dressing it when you're done part of this. So it's a multi-step process, and for us, if you've watched some of my other things, Miles, you got a picture of Papa Voodoo or Big Red there. We can show up. Usually what we do is...
I cannot post those.
Huh?
I cannot post those to chat.
Oh, you cannot. But you can you share your screen? Can I put you back up? Can you share your screen? Look and see if you can share your screen. If you can, I'll put you back up. Anyway, I don't usually use just a bare skull. If you've seen Big Red or Papa Voodoo, you can put a link to Papa Voodoo. He's a skeleton, and he stayed pretty much this form. But usually what we'll do is take these skulls and we'll sculpt on top of them. And so that's how Big Red was made, and Pirate Pete, and a lot of mine that are actually we use these as a base form. And I don't want to take any credit. Bob Risley does all my sculpting and painting for me, so he does all the sculpting. But he's the one that creates, you know, those wonderful faces that we have. But this is what he uses for a base, and there's a whole chapter of it in the book about how he goes about what he uses and how he does that. But you know, so that there's that portion of it. So you know, I recommend that you kind of start out and take a sheet of paper and kind of see, what do you want your character to do? You know, what motion is he actually going to do? How much control of him do you want? And kind of lay it out. You know, oh, I want both arms to move, and that's all I need is this motion. Okay, well then I only need 2 servos, 1 in each shoulder, and I can start with that. You know, I want him to pick up a beer stein. If you've looked at Big Red, you know, he's waving his arms, and he pushes beer stein down the bar, and it's on a stepper track, and the beer stein goes down the track and everything. You know, okay, well I need, you know, 2 in the shoulder, I need an elbow, I might even need 1 in the wrist to move his hand. But you know, kind of lay that out so that you can kind of see where you're going to start with, because before you even start, I really recommend that you also think about the electronics part of it, because this is only half of it. This looks really cool, but if you don't have the electronics part of it figured out, it's a static prop. And you know, you may as well use PVC and put it on there, because it's not going to do anything without the electronics. And I think that's the part that scares more people away. Is okay, how do I make it move? How do I control it? And I totally understand that. And again, 5 years ago, I would have said, yes, I know, I agree with you. And you know, that it's a pretty monumental task. Again, if you've seen Big Red, Papa Voodoo, we used to use, and I still do, because it's a much finer control system. But Brian Lincoln put together a puppeteering program that we used, and let me pull this out, and it was programmed 4 servos at a time using this, and we would turn it. There's potentiometers here, so I could do the wrist, elbow, and 2 in the shoulder, and then we would build on top of that and add to it until we got all the servos done. It's a great system, still very useful. This is the manual. You need to read the entire manual to do it. And again, wonderful system, but it scared a lot of people away, because you know, there was a lot of work to go into, a lot of studying and everything to get it work. If any of you have seen Richard's Davy Jones sculpt that he just did, I think he's got a video, and I think Richard's here. Richard's, if you're here, put a link. He used that system as well, and he used it in his Rocketeer last year, and I think it's switching, either that or he's going over to the new one. But his Rocketeer used the old system. So, you know, that was really good. But I wanted something that would be a lot more simple, less complicated, less scary for people to do. And that's where I got involved with the folks over at Adacor, Andre and Alex. We're all in a makers group here in San Diego, and we're sitting around one day, and I said, you know, I sure wish I could do this. And they said, well, I think we could do that. I said, oh, really? And so I keep telling them what I want, and they keep saying, okay, we can do that. Okay, we can do that. So they take my ideas, and they've created the magic, or added the magic, to make this system work. And so that's what we're using now. These are receiver boards, and they're programmed with a little, you know, this isn't much more than what you play with your PlayStation. Currently, each board does 6 servos. So I'm going to use 2 boards. So currently I could do 12 servos, and then I could run relays or LED lights on the setup here. Let me change over here. Let me share screen. Let's do this. That's one of the receiver boards. First to hear it tonight, I just found out, Andre told me this afternoon when he gave me the discount code. We have got a brand new piece that is going to be added to this on these headers. There's 2 rows of headers here. You'll just see there and there. well, you will put male headers in, and there is going to be an audio board that will actually drive a jaw to the audio and give us this 8th servo. Those went out to the board manufacturer for the beta testers, and we hope to have those out very soon. So you guys are the first ones to hear that. I know you've all been anxious to get that. So it will allow me to do now, let me just switch this off. It will allow me to do 16 servos and 2 audio tracks. So again, if you watch me on Instagram or Twitter, you've seen the monkey. The monkey is going to be with the steampunk guy. They're going to be singing, and the monkey's jaw is going to be going. So he'll be using 1 audio track, and this guy's going to be using the other, and I'll be using all except maybe 1 or 2 of the servos to start with. So, I had to plan exactly what I was going to do, what I was going to need, how I was going to program it. Now, there's certainly a whole lot of other ways to do this. You could use an Arduino, you can use a Raspberry Pi, and hard code all of those things. And that's certainly doable. A lot of guys do it. I've done that. This is a whole lot more simple, and there's no programming at all. If you want to change any of the parameters, you don't program. We have a text file, and you just go in there and say, it says, do you want to have the audio track on? You put a Y, yes. No programming, none of that. You just go into the text file and answer the questions. So, so that's a whole lot more simple than it used to be. So kind of got to think about what you're doing on the electronic side and how you're going to run it before you even start shopping for all of this. If you could only afford 1 of these boards, you couldn't afford 2. You're on a budget. I totally understand that. And you only have 8 outputs. Don't plan a guy that needs 15. Then you've got to pare down, your plan for what you're going to, integrate into your character. And you may have to adjust, what you want it to do. So, you think about all of this stuff before you even order the first piece, before you even start cutting pieces. So that's my suggestion. Any questions, Miles? Are they all sleeping?
No, a couple questions going on, but we'll get to those a little bit later.
Okay.
Go ahead and continue on your track.
So I want to talk a little bit about the difference between the Go Builder stuff, which I'm using currently on this guy, and the Actibotics stuff. And you probably can see that the form factor on the Actibotics is much smaller than it is on the Go Builder. This is much hardier, much sturdier, and again, made for robots and stuff for STEM program. One other difference, this is US threads, this is metric. If that makes a difference to you, I've got 2 sets of boxes of screws, which I hate to do. Again, you guys that follow me know I really like to stick to one, but I've had to go to the other. When I got ready to start building this before Christmas, I went online actually first to Actibotics, and I looked right after they had that big sale for any of you watched that. And they were out of half of the stuff that they were totally out of gearboxes. So I was kind of stuck. It was like, all right, if I want to get started, I went over to Go Build It, and they had everything I needed. So it's like, oh, perfect. I've worked with it before. I'm happy with it. So I went ahead and built out a Go Build It. But I use both interchangeably. This is a little easier to hide in a character. Again, if it's small, it's much smaller. If you looked at Papa Voodoo, we were able to hide all of his mechanism in a skeleton, and you really couldn't see any of the mechanism. This would have been much more difficult, being able to hide this in a skeleton. Of course, if I'm going to cover it with clothes, then it's not as big of an issue. If it's a bigger character, bigger monster, lifting bigger stuff, I'm going to want to go with Go Build Us. So also, one thing before I forget, that list that we posted with the Actibotics parts list, I listed the servo gearboxes I used. They do not offer these anymore. They've changed. They still have gearboxes, but they're different now. They use Go Build the servos. it's the same type of thing. You go find the one you want. You can buy these in a multiple of different torques, 3-to-1, 5-to-1, 7-to-1, 9-to-1, and I think GoBuilda might even have a 2-to-1. I think they have one extra.
Those can we talk about those? So those are 180-degree servos. The 180 is not available anymore. Can we talk about what could be replacement for those?
They do. The ones they have are actually at least 180. So, you know, that's not a problem. And again, for most of character stuff, you don't need 180. I mean, for this guy, you know, my arm is going to turn there to there. I mean, 90, 100 degrees is about all I'm going to use out of my servo. In fact, when I go into my configuration file, I'm going to set end stops, end limits on this so that it doesn't even use everything it can use. So that's not as big an issue, but I think it's 276 degrees that you can get now off of the Servo City site. Again, I haven't ordered any of the brand new ones because I ordered these and they were out of all of these. And that certainly is another way to save quite a bit of money, is watch those sales. Servo City does some killer sales every year, and watch for those. You know, you don't have to pay full rack all the time. So watch for their sales. I haven't seen as much for the GoBuilda. This is still pretty new. But the Actibotic stuff goes on sale at least a couple times a year. And I usually post it on my site when I see that. But I know this last sale was really, really good. So when choosing a gearbox, you know, a lot of people say, well, I want it to run as fast as I want. There's a trade-off between speed and torque. Torque is the strength, how much it can lift. And personally, I want all the torque that I can get because I want it to be able to lift as much as possible. And speed for this type of a character is not important. You are not going to be doing pneumatic style speed scare props with this. If you need something to blast out, you know, servos are not the thing for you. You know, you probably should be over on pneumatics. But for this type of thing, I usually go with the higher torque and don't worry about the speed. If you're doing this type of a configuration, the servo that requires the most torque is this one right here. It's this lift servo in the shoulder because it's having to lift up the entire arm plus whatever you've got in his hand. So, you know, if you're putting something in his hand that he's lifting, you know, this other one, I have him lifting up the skull. This is the one with the electromagnet, and to make the magic work, he just has a washer glued, Gorilla glued onto his head, and that's what connects onto this electromagnet. And he moves this electromagnet, or with the electromagnet around. But, you know, if you're putting a beer stein, if you're putting a lantern, whatever, and you want it to lift, this is the servo right here that has to have the most power. This one here is just rotating. It's not bad. It doesn't need as much. The one I usually put down here is my body rotation. It's not so much, doesn't need as big or as strong a servo. The elbow is my next one. So like on this character, I use the biggest servo that they've got. This is a 9-to-1 on the lift. And then I used 5-to-1s for the rest of them. So again, I don't care. I want them slower. I like the more natural movement that I get from the slower movement. And then I get the added torque. So that's how I go through and choose which torque. And I think they're all the same price. So it's you know, not a matter of saving money by getting one with less torque. But if you need one that actually for some reason has to move faster, you can get like a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1. Just remember, you're not going to be able to lift as much with that. Now, I think the 9-to-1 on the new servo is around 2,500 ounce inches. I don't remember that for sure, and I'm not even sure where I saw that. But if that's the case.
Can we also talk about 12 volt versus 24 volt when you finish here?
Yeah. For those of you that started with servos with the high-tech 425s, they had 48 ounce inches. This is 2,400 ounce inches, 50 times the torque of those that we started with. So these are monsters. They really do a great job, and they've done everything I want them to do. So again, you got to remember when you're lifting, you're not only lifting whatever you're putting in his hand, but the clothing, the padding, whatever you're doing to keep clothing out of the gears, it all adds up, and you want to keep that. You know what? Let me do one thing. Everybody got my better. All right. So 12 volt versus 24 volt for what miles now?
Just for servos in general. Just for
the servos, hobby servos that we use normally operate between 4.8 volts and 7.4 volts. You want to check the more voltage you can put through them, the more torque they're going to have. And that's one thing when we design these boards. These servos can run off the main input. This is the board input. There you can see two headers here. The right-hand one is what feeds the board, and it will also do those servos. What I recommend you do is move these jumpers up and add a separate servo power supply, which is what I do. That's why there's two sets of servos headers or power headers here. So then if you're using, you need 6 volts to run the board, but say you want to run 7.4 volts to run your servos, you can use a bigger power supply to feed those than you can with this, and you can't run a whole lot off of the main power board. So you want 2 separate power supplies, but make sure that you check and see what the servo you're using is rated for. Some of them are only 4.8, some are 6 volt, and some are up to 7.4. In fact, there may even be some 8.8 volt ones now too. One thing on servos I want to talk about as far as budget and cost savings. A lot of people come to me and say, well, I looked at the high-tech servos, and the high-tech servo I wanted was $50, and I can go on, Alibaba or eBay, and I can find a servo for $12. So I'm going to buy those. Well, buy extras, because you get what you pay for, and the last thing that you want is your character to fail halfway through Halloween. And those cheap servos are just that. They cause all sorts of problems. They fail. They don't have the longevity that a high-end servo. I'm a high-tech guy. That's what I use, high-tech, and now I'm using some of the Go Build the servos. But the Futaba ones are good quality, great servos. I've used those before. But as I do with so much of it, I generally, find a brand, find a size, find a voltage that I like, and try and stick with that as much as possible. So I'm a high-tech guy. Take that for what it's worth. Any questions? Yes, Go Build It does have servos.
One thing somebody's questioning, and this is something that I haven't dealt with myself a lot, is that building a 3-axis skull or something similar to these characters and putting them outside and waterproofing them.
You can buy waterproof servos, and they're more expensive. What I do is, and again, I'm in Southern California, so in the last 15 years that I can remember, I've had 1 year of rain. And don't hate me for that. I'm sorry for those of you that are on the East Coast and then the South. But if it rains, I have a whole slew of trash bags already open, and they all get covered in trash bags. I don't leave my animatronics out in the rain. There are just too many things. It's not just the servos. You can waterproof the servos, but then you've got the connectors, where water can get in. You've got your electronics. You've got to be careful that you don't waterproof your electronics so much that the heat caused by here causes, your boards to overheat. You have all sorts of issues that you have to consider in addition to just keeping the water out of your servo. You've got your power lines going to the characters. All of that, has to be waterproofed, and the level of difficulty that, it just goes up exponentially when you're trying to keep this waterproof. So my suggestion is, put them under cover or don't run them in the rain.
And then can we touch on the Evil Ted's foam body? I don't know if you have one available there quickly.
The what?
The foam body covers, the armor. There you go. Somebody's questioning about that.
So again, we talked about that is the dressing. Or that clothing is going to get tangled up into these gears, lock this servo up, and I speak from experience. I smoked one of these because even though I thought I had it well covered, got a piece of clothing in here and it started burning inside the servo. When I disassembled it, it was smoking hot and it had gotten in there. And I'm lucky that I didn't have more problems. But so you have to put a body frame, not only to keep clothing out, but just to make it look good. It's so hard to get rid of these angular looks. And I don't care how much, and I've done aluminum brackets and rounded everything off and everything, and it's still just really difficult to get a really believable body form to it. So what I started doing, this came from my checking out cosplay, is I use some of their body ideas that they use for making armor, and then this just drapes over the top. And this one's way too big for this particular guy. This is for one of my other characters, but and that gives a beautiful form. I do have a video on my website on how to make these, how to put these together, how to cut them, what glue to use, the whole thing. So there is a tutorial on the site on how to build those, and they're super cheap. These are you can use floor liners or floor pads from Harbor Freight. The ones I like and I use, these are like camping mats, really thin camping mats from Walmart are the ones I like. They're a little softer, a little thinner. Before I started doing this, I was thinking about going and making fiberglass frames and actually, building it up, and what a pain in the butt that would have been. But it would have and that's how Disney does it. But I came up with this, and the nice thing is it's got some give to it. So if you're programming and your character moves farther than you want him to, and he smashes up against his chest piece, that thing's going to give instead of smashing and cracking and causing damage to your mechanism. So I really like this design. That gives me my shoulders protected and my body, and then you still have to keep the material out of, especially elbows and here. So, you can use water bottles. I use a piece of aluminum brackets and everything, but, some of that really light aluminum strip from that you can get at Home Depot or whatever. If you're going to buy a bunch of it, I recommend that you find a metal shop in your town and go buy it. It's about half the price than what you'll pay at Home Depot. I got really lucky when Ace Hardware, one of the local hardware stores, sold out. And I went the very last 15 minutes as they were closing the store, and they had all their aluminum strip. And I think I bought like 75 10-foot pieces of different size aluminum strip. So I've got more than I'll use in my lifetime. So I use a lot of it. But that works really good. The tubes, the pool tubes work good, for adding, the right shape to the arms. But again, still wanting to keep this out. The one that has caused me problems, and I'm going to change my camera angle a little bit, is I have a servo down here. This is my body rotation now. It's right here. And that's what gives me my body rotation. And if you can see on the top of this gear, this is a common place. Wires hang down here and they get into that gear right there. And that's chewed up more servo wires for me than I want to admit to. I just cut a little thin piece of wood that's bigger than the gear, and it bolts onto that gear. And that's how I keep help keep those wires out of that lower gear. So I've done done servos a lot, and if you watch a lot of the videos, you'll see the progression. You know, I used to do all single spine characters supporting the upper body with a single spline. I have since gone over to the dual spines here, and then mounting a board to be able to put my electronics, because as you see with this guy, there's a whole mess of servo wires back here that go down to the controller down here. With this design, all my servo wires stay up here. None of them come down here. Only my power leads, and if I've got a PIR. This PIR happens to be set in his chest. But if I'm having that off, but that really minimizes the mess I've got coming down here. Okay.
And how about at what temperature do servos start failing?
I'm in San Diego.
Yeah, our good friend.
Yeah, at 95 degrees. Yeah, no, I have more problems with heat than I do with cold. For a buddy of ours, Pat, who is up in Canada and often has snow on Halloween, I don't think he's had as much problem with the servos having difficulty in the cold. It's the controllers. It's keeping his controllers warm. So he's added, you know, like either a light bulb or little tiny hand warmers and stuff to keep the controllers warm. So he really seems to have more problem with that than he does with his servos. So again, all right, I want to switch cameras. I want to talk about some other stuff. Any other questions? David, I see, is posting some other other controllers. Again, Fright Props has got great ones. Skulltronics, we've got a discussion going on the DIY animatronics about using DMX. David does a lot more DMX than I do. I use my DMX system primarily for lights and to trigger specific shows that I don't want to have them on at the same time. So I'll have one play, then I'll have a break, and then I'll have it trigger another one. But my props are all individually triggered the way I do it. My feeling is if my computer goes down and I lose my DMX, I still have some lights and all of the props are going to work. If you have a DMX system and everything is hooked up to DMX and DMX goes down, you're dark until you get it rebooted. So, you know, two different schools of thought, both of them work. Both of, you know, people are successful in both ways. You just want to consider that. You know, if you're going to use DMX, you might still want to consider having some freestandings just in case, if for no other reason, for peace of mind. Okay. But anyway, there are a lot of other great props controllers out there. Again, Fright Props has got, you know, the whole Peekaboo line is really good. They've got some servo lines or servo controllers as well. So, you know, what I'm using now is, you know, it's the controller we've designed. I find that the easiest, the fastest, the best for me. But again, what works for me may not necessarily be the right solution for you. So, you know, even within our group, our video chat group, I think there's still half a dozen different controllers out there, even though most of those guys also use mine. So, you know, we've all done that a lot. I use a lot of pickaxe controllers for my really simple props, and I still use those because I can write 20 lines of code and have them operate and do exactly what I want. There's no reason to buy, you know, an 8-channel board if I've only got one thing happening. So, you know, there are times that I don't use this as well. It's again, you fit the controller to the project that you're trying to build. Okay.
And Steve, the new controller board, it does have connections on there for LEDs.
Yes. Yeah, you can run LED lights. Now this guy, I have his eyes on. This is not the hat he's going to wear. This is my top hat. For those of you that have been to conventions with me, this is his top hat. He's just going to have LEDs probably in his top hat, not the animated eyes, but he will have a set of animated eyes put in here. So, and for those of you that haven't seen these, started using these a couple, 3 years ago. These are from Adafruit, probably the best bang from the buck that I've gotten off of for any of my Halloween props lately. And they used to be a real pain in the butt. You can see the one over here. This is how they were. You can see the wire. You had to do all this soldering, very fine soldering up in here, very fine soldering on the teensy board, very difficult, not a beginner soldering project by any means. Pain in the butt. They now have come out with the mask, and it's all comes up. You put a battery in it, and it works out of the box if you get a good one. But I mean, I put a battery in mine and turned them on when I bought them, and he works. And then usually we put a glass dome, half dome, over the top of it, and it adds a lot of depth to these. But this is the best bang for the buck that I found. In fact, I use those since for Halloween, you know, having the light up eyes and the blinking and the moving. I don't even do servo driven eyes anymore. I've got them, but you know, this is my go-to now. So Monster Mask, I think, from Adafruit. And again, they come all soldered together. They even give you, if you've got a 3D printer, they provide the file to make the case that this is in. This is the mask right here. The orange part is the 3D printed part that I did. Okay. Anything else before we move on?
We're good. Let's continue.
Let's continue. All right, I'm going to switch cameras. We're going to go to my other screen. All right, parts is parts. Let's talk parts a little bit. One thing, again, I'm building GoBuilda, and GoBuilda's a pretty new system. Actibotics is great because they've been around for a while, and they've made all the part, or almost all the parts that we need. I use their parts in ways that they didn't originally envision. And I've become good friends with the tech guys over at Servo City. And in fact, they've added some components that I've requested. Unfortunately, GoBuilda hasn't caught up with them yet. So one of the components they do not have is this bracket right here. And it has to be a big bracket to be able to go onto this and be able to have the big gear under it for the other servo. So this is still something that I've got to go into my shop and you know, fabricate this piece because they just don't have a component for it yet. And you can see, you know, I drill them all out. This particular one has 2 sets of holes in them so that I can thread in right into this tube. You know, if you're using the arm extensions, you can use the tube like this, or you can use the X-rail like this. Same thing, they're still all threaded. I like the tube a little bit better. I find it a little easier for, you know, like putting pool noodles on and stuff if I'm doing that. The one nice thing about using X-rail, though, is if you're going to want to attach something to this, they've got nice brackets and nuts that you can put in here and attach, you know, L brackets and all sorts of stuff, or, you know, you can attach other pieces to. So that's real handy. You know, that's what I use for the body now, for the dual spine that I use. And then I'm able to attach that piece of wood. So, you know, they come in with all these different components, and again, you can save some money. When I first made this and I was putting this together, I had only had the holes drilled for the servos. And so in order to use this tube to make it fit and use the 4 screws I had to use a bracket. Well, the bracket's $5 or $6. So instead of using the bracket, I went out and drilled 4 more holes in there. So now it's got the bolt pattern that I needed, and it connects right to that, and it saves me, you know, $6 in buying another adapter for it. I probably, in fact, I do have an adapter on the end of, it's not this adapter, it's this one, but I have one of these adapters that's going on to the end of this, because for this guy, The hand that I am hoping to use is this. It's a hand I've had a set of these hands forever. And so this thing is going to mount. Doesn't do real good with the label. Remove that from the label. This is actually going to mount onto the end of this. And then that will mount onto the end of this. So that's I will use one of these brackets for that end. But they've got brackets to do all sorts of stuff, you know, all sorts of different L brackets. But the beauty of this stuff is this channel is very fast to assemble because all of the hole patterns all match. Everything lines up. You just, you know, line it up and put a screw through it and you're done. You know, it's Tinker Toys for big kids. But boy, is it fast, easy, strong, adaptable. You know, I just love this stuff. But again, you want to be able to design it so that you use the minimum amount of parts as you can. It's, you know, save yourself some money. To show you the difference between the Go Builda, this is, do I have a small piece of this? Thought I did. Okay. This is Actibotics channel. That's Go Builda channel. So you can kind of get an idea of the size difference of the Go Builda versus the Actibotics. Just again, something else to consider when you're thinking about it. Now, when I attach my servos together, this is a bracket I'll use to attach the lift servo from the shoulder, you know, to the elbow, and this is going to fit, you know, up in here. Again, you can use this heavy duty. I like this because I can attach screws to both sides of the servo. As you can see, the servo has got holes on both sides to attach to. So it's a stronger, you know, connection, but you could connect it just on one side. I've done this and used these. This bracket's a third of the price of this bracket. So, you know, you can do that. If you're not lifting a whole lot of weight, you can get by with the lighter one. Use the lighter one. Save yourself some money. Okay. And again, just to kind of get an idea of the difference, Actibotics servo here, Go Builda servo, gearbox. You can get an idea about how, you know, the size difference on these. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? Nope.
Nope. Let's cruise on. 10-minute warning.
Cruising. Are you? Am I on my time limit?
You can talk.
I told Miles I wanted to do this in an hour. He knows me too well. All right. I wanted to do a couple things. When you're placing your order, a couple things to remember that I still have to remind myself to add to my list. Make sure to put your servo extensions on. You know, you're gonna the servos, especially from the elbow, are not going to reach the servo cable that comes onto with the servo is only about that long. So make sure to order extensions, not servo cables. Servo extensions have a male and a female end on them. Servo cables have two males. So make sure to get extensions so that you can reach your controller board. The other thing is, don't forget to order the screws and order a variety because it's different sizes for different components. This is what I do. This is when I get, these are my Go Builda screws. So, you know, I've got all the different nuts and different sizes and the button heads because sometimes you need a flat head, you know, instead of a hex head. One thing I did notice, my new screws I just ordered, they have low profile hex heads now. They're about half the height, which is really cool. I really like those. I don't know if you can see that. So the low profile ones are really neat. So I'm happy to see that. So, you know, put them all together. They're a lot easier to grab the right ones, you know, if you've got them laid out in a box instead of trying to dig them out of, you know, a bunch of the bags that they come in. So order those. A couple of things for working with this stuff. You're still working, sometimes shipping a bottle type things. You're working in gut parts and you're trying to get screws in. A couple things that I recommend that you have. I love these little alligator thingers. I've got this big one and a small, and I've got a small one. This really helps to get into some of those spots. That really helps. Ball end hex heads, instead of regular, the straight ones, worth their weight in gold. And then they're even handier if you magnetize them. And if you guys don't know this trick, you buy one of these little things. They come in. I should have another one around here somewhere. Here's another one. Here's another one. The magnetizer, demagnetizer, and you run this through here, and you can magnify the head, and then it will hold your screw. Tons and tons of aggravation saved by using a ball end, so that you don't have to go straight on. You can kind of get it in an angle if you need to, and having a magnetized head. Two things that'll save you a ton of aggravation down the road. We talked about protecting the wires from the gears. We talked about the extension grippers. Any other tools? When you're working, let me switch cameras really quick. Let's see. I think we can go to the other camera now. For those of you that have a drill press, might recognize this is a drill press vise. They're really heavy, and they really come in handy for holding these so that they stay stable. You can see when I travel, of course, I don't bring this on the airplane, but you know, they're clipped with big spring clips onto the table, because they will move around. The last thing you want them to do is walk around and fall off the table. So, and the other thing, Miles will be happy to see, when you get your programming, make a reserve copy. Here's a spare micro SD card for the controller. 2 years ago at Transworld, this guy's been in the airplanes all over the country, but last time at Transworld, we got there and he wouldn't work. The SD card hangs over the edge by about that much. And somehow those bonehead meat-handed baggage handlers put some weight on it and put a crack in that little micro SD card. So all my controllers now have spare of the actual programs that go into the boards. So so that's that. As far as triggering, I wanted to go over that a little bit. There's, you know, a lot of different ways to trigger these off. Mine usually have multiples. Again, this guy travels with me, so I use them, you know, in my presentations at Transworld and other conventions. So this is just a little push button single relay. The relay board is right there. It's just one of these. These are pretty cheap. I get these on Amazon, and they're, I don't know, $10. Just got a single relay in there, and then just have it wired up to the board to trigger off of that. So that's one way to do it. If you want to, you know, manually trigger off, you know, every time it goes off. You can also use the push button. This is just a cheapy little one I made. You know, it's just got a little push button wired into a length of cable in a little sleeve of PEC water tubing, you know, so I can hold on to it. And again, usually I don't do this in my haunt because I want it all automated. But, you know, if you like to be able to be in control of this, or if you have an actor that you want to trigger off something, you know, you can put something like this together. Either way, I kind of like the wireless ones better, personally, but anytime I can get rid of wires, it's a good thing. The thing I use the most is PIRs, passive infrared sensors. These are what we buy. You may not recognize that on any of my characters, because somebody asked about rain. I don't have a problem with rain so much as dew. My PIRs work, even here in San Diego, work really good until about 8 o'clock at night. Then it starts to get damp. And before I started putting these, the boards on the back would get damp, and I'd be getting false triggers. So now I put them in a little enclosure. I've got a video on how I did these. These are just plumbing parts, you know, from Home Depot, actually from Lowe's, because at least my Home Depot doesn't have one of the connectors I use. But But anyway, PIRs, I really like them. They don't work good in the sunlight, so don't be discouraged if you've got this set up during the day and you're getting false triggers. Once it gets dark, they really work better. These are not motion sensors like a spirit prop does. The reason that the spirit props work really good is because they have the lights on and they see movement. Once they're in the dark, they don't see movement anymore. They don't trigger anymore. You want a PIR, passive infrared. And these work much better. But this way, these are really broad. And if you see this one right here, this is a little 3D printed case that I found on Thingiverse. It's not my design, somebody else's. But that's a really wide field of view. I don't usually want that. Again, this is just for testing now. He will eventually have a PIR like this. And now I can really focus that beam exactly where I want it. So that I know exactly when it's going to get triggered. So that's what I use for that. Any questions on that? I know I'm over 6 o'clock, Miles. I see it. 5 minutes. Okay, I want to go over one other thing. I'm going to switch back to the other camera. And documenting what you're working on. We all carry a camera around. Everybody's got one of these. Take pictures of what you're doing, especially if you've got something put together and it's working, and then you have to disassemble it, because these things you will disassemble multiple times. Take pictures of where all your wires go so that you don't have to refigure it out every time you do it. All of my wires, especially power wires, if I'm using multiple voltages, they get labeled. Can you see that? This is what I'm using now. I love this stuff. That says servo on it. What I used to do is use silver Sharpies, and I'd go ahead and write up on here, that which goes to S1 or S5 or whatever, so I could always find it, or it was 5 volts or 12 volts, if it was a power line. I love this stuff. This is shrink tube, printable shrink tube that comes out on my marker, on my marking machine. So that's what I used. All my power leads now have, this one's servoed, so it doesn't have the voltage because I don't know specifically what the voltage is going to be. But this stuff is really, really cool. Comes in multiple sizes, multiple colors. I like the yellow. This is my new go-to stuff. But again, if all you've got is a silver Sharpie, again, silver Sharpies are wonderful. So much of the stuff we have is black. Black Sharpies don't do squat on this. You want a silver Sharpie, and label which header pin each one of these goes on, or what the voltage is, so that you don't make a mistake. You don't plug the wrong voltage into it, or you don't have to refigure out, which header your servo lines go on. So this is a servo header. Each one of these will, I'll go ahead and heat shrink one of these up, and it'll list exactly, which board it is and which position it goes in on the board. Miles, I think I gave you the link to this shrink tube, and then you can see which brand of machine I have.
Very good.
It's in my other room. So if we can't find that, remind me afterwards. I can get that for you. So again, mark everything, take pictures, mark everything. A neat way to keep things clean, if you've got a bunch of wires afterwards. I love this this conduit. This stuff it's ribbed, and it's got a break in it, so you can just open it up and wrap it around your wires to clean everything up. It's, again, another great way to keep things out of your gears, but it also keeps everything neat and clean. Again, it's amazing how those wires will jump out and grab every tree. Every cat that comes by will grab it. So the more you can secure that wiring on these animatronics, the better off you are. So that's that. I wanted to talk a little second. Again, this is the controller. My idea with this is part of the next book, the second book. This is a chapter in the second book, is this, and I'm actually adding a soldering chapter. And what I wanted was a project that started out as a project other than a blinking LED that a beginner solderer can build, a project and practice their soldering with, and then actually have something that's usable and worthwhile that they can use in their haunt. That's the path I started down originally. It's not difficult soldering to do, but there's multiple boards that you do, and then they all bolt together. If you don't want to solder them together, Andre and his crew will solder together for $20. $20, the biggest deal in town. I think that's great, and they'll test it before they send it away to you. So the kit, I think, Andre, correct me if I'm wrong. Price is, I don't want to mess this up, $69 for the, I'm going to check here. It's on Adecore. You want the receiver one. This comes in a couple different models. You want the most current one, which has the receiver board, and that is $69.45. But remember, Andre until tomorrow did give you guys a 10% off coupon code. So, but again, good till tomorrow at midnight. But this is what I'm using. And again, hopefully a couple weeks we'll have the daughter board that's going to go on the receiver board. We'll be able to have audio and a talking jaw servo. It'll go out to the beta testers first, and then hopefully before long we will have it out for. They'll have it, on the website for sale. So that's that. Talked about the eyes, power. I just did want to talk really quick about power. One of the biggest issues people have. I'm switching cameras again. If they do have problems with some of these big animatronics, they say, something's not working. When I built one of these guys, it's not here, it's in the other room. But with the Go Builda, my shoulders wouldn't work. And what I had done is I had run out of my short servo extensions. So I had some 4-foot servo extensions that I had running from the shoulder down to the controller, and just had it all coiled up. And using an underpowered power supply, and the shoulders wouldn't work. As soon as I put on the right length of extension and put up enough power on them, they work great. So just like wiper motors, if you have wiper motors and they don't work, you probably don't have enough amps in your power supply. So 5 volt, 5 amp, 12 volt, 5 amp. But same thing with these. I'm using 6 volt for the servos. I'm using 10 amps to run the servo, 6 volt, 10 amp power supplies. So make sure to use adequate power. And again, really recommend separate power supplies for the servos and for the board. Don't try and run it all off the board power supply. All right.
So Steve, what was your first prop that you built? Something simple, maybe give guys
first
an
prop
idea? Instead of jumping into something major like this, something basic that they can build. I suggested the 3-axis skull. What was your first thing you built? I don't know that myself.
Probably 3-axis skull was what got me into this more advanced stuff. And again, when I got started, you used a joystick, and it was very complicated. And in fact, I was sitting down with the guy that was teaching me how to do it. And I said, well, what are you doing with the joystick? What are you trying to do? He says, I don't know. I'm just trying to make the head move. And I said, well, if that's all you're doing, why don't we just write code that put random movement into the head? And that's where for those of you that seen, my boards, that's where the Frankenstein code came from. And I did random code. A lot of my props just use random code. It makes it really easy. Just plug it into the board and the head moves, and they look really realistic. But probably 3-axis. 3-axis is a little harder right now, again, until we get somebody with a system where we can get the parts. I'm not quite sure where that's gonna go. This one from Stan Winston was really cool. It's really stout, robust. Little more difficult to try and hide this into a character My actually, when I really got started using this mechanism and the puppeteering of the characters, where I'm actually programming in and puppeteering all their movements, was Papa Voodoo. That actually really pushed my writing career. I'd done a little bit of writing for Nuts and Bolts and Servo Magazine, but that was the first one that I did that really I got the cover, which was really cool, with Papa Voodoo, and that started my column that I wrote for 2.5 years for Servo City, or for Servo Magazine, that ended up turning into the book. So Papa Voodoo is still one of the earliest and still one of my favorites. He's hard to beat. Just a little thing on that. We started that. I had 45 days, I think, from the day my publisher said, "Why don't you do this?" and we agreed to do this, to when I had to turn in copy and pictures. 45 days. I had a group, as I often do with some of these more complex things. I have other people from around the country that help. Brian Lincoln, again, developed the puppeteering system in that time. We got it up and running. I had some friends in North Carolina that did the shrunken heads and the top hat and some of the other dress. Pat in Canada did the audio track. It really makes some of these projects run. Bob, who lives here in San Diego as well, did the painting and everything on that great big huge 6.5-foot skeleton. I miss those. I do miss those. So that was my first. So I did see somebody asked about conventions for next year. I've already agreed to the new date for Transworld. So God willing, and the river don't rise, and we get to go in May. I will be at Transworld in May. If that goes and everything goes well, I would imagine Midsummer Scream up in Los Angeles will happen. So I will probably be there. And depending on if West Coast goes, I was scheduled to be at West Coast last year. And of course that was canceled as well. But I hope to be at West Coast as well if we run. So those are the 3 that I'm thinking about right now. And again, I usually do a steampunk one here in San Diego. If that one goes, we're just got to wait and see. I'm an essential worker, so I think I get vaccinated early, but we'll have to see. All right, other questions before we close it out? I don't want to leave. Nobody has been asking questions, so I do not want to leave without answering your questions. Crickets. Is everybody asleep?
Anybody's got questions, go ahead and ask them. Steve will field them directly now instead of me trying to second guess.
We still may want to tell them. They seem like they're a couple minutes delayed coming through on StreamYard than from when they come up over there. But yes, the eyes are fantastic. Again, this is probably the biggest hit that I've gotten from anything that I've done in the last couple of years is adding these to the characters. And this one's all self-contained, so I wear this at the conventions and stuff oftentimes. So in the hat band is the control boards up here. The battery is back here. There's a little push button to turn it on and off. Yeah, this is my personal steampunk hat that I wear. So, but again, I probably have at least 10 of these sets of eyes on different props. And they really look good in the dark. They really do. Linear actuators, I do use those. I did want to mention, especially when I can. These have got a lot more torque. They're slow, but again, they have a lot more torque. The hardest, the servo that gets the most use is the nod servo. So being able to, on the mask design, be able to put down a little linear actuator to make the head nod forward and back. These plug in just like a servo, the same 3 wire cable, and take the same signal to operate. So I love using these. My new one, for this character here, if I can figure it out, in his legs, I'm still waiting, but it's going to be linear servos this big to add some motion to the legs. But again, they'll still operate off of the RC controller. You don't want okay, Joe. I was going to try and get through the whole night without answering that question, but since I pushed for a question, Papa Voodoo or one of these characters that's got at least, there's 3 in each servos in each arm, servo gearboxes. One in the body is 7, 4 regular servos in the head is 11, and all the control. You are if you bought all the parts from Actibotics, regular price, including the electronics, the skeleton, all the accoutrements, it's between $1,500 and $2,000.
But you could certainly use that idea and strip it down a little bit, maybe just the head turns and talks a little bit. It doesn't have to have the full show. And I think that's a great place to start. Put a skull on a basic skeleton body and build from there. And you can always add to your build too.
Right. If I was just starting out and I was trying to do something budget, then maybe that's a good question to have. The talking part of it, number one, that gives you the most bang for the buck as far as servo is have him talking. So that's number one. Then I'd probably add another servo and add rotate. I wouldn't worry so much about nod and tilt, but I'd put rotate. So, I've already cut out a couple servos. I maybe have one arm that only has one servo that works, that rotates, and then maybe have the other servo do a little bit more. You could put 2. So, you could get by with much less. You don't have to have them fully articulated like I do. And I wouldn't recommend that you go full bore the first time. I definitely recommend that you start. If you haven't done any animatronics, let me pre-warn you, is once you start down this path, everything will need to work. You won't be able to make a tombstone without making it move. It has to lift or move or break open in the middle, or something behind it has to pop up. Once you start down the moving train or get on the moving train, you want everything to move. But it sure does add a lot to your display. Vertically, 170 degrees arc vertically. Ooh, 10 foot on a 6-foot arm. You're probably, that's even exceeding wiper motors. That's a big pneumatics. Well, you're not going to get an arc on a pneumatic cylinder. You are probably looking at a big wheelchair motor or something to be able to lift that much. Mike, that's a pretty, $10 feet. So it's just 10 feet and it's just going through 170 degree arc. Yeah, it's going to be hard getting it lifted up, that 10 pounds. You're probably going to be looking at like a wheelchair motor. I got to use those. If you guys saw my steampunk train, that was another thing for the new book. That's the hardest thing for me is every chapter I like to have a build in it, and that steampunk train is another chapter in the book. So that was my first foray into using wheelchairs, and I'm really hooked. That's a really neat platform to work on, and it's RC controlled. So if you haven't seen that, go look at that. My grandkids, that's their favorite thing, because it's big enough and hefty enough that I can tow them around the yard. Okay, anything else? Yes, there are a lot of 3D skulls on Thingiverse. And for those of you that haven't gotten into 3D printing yet, there's a lot of opportunity to utilize that in what we do. Even a lot of, I have all sorts of things that I've made, but this is one of the coolest little things. I use these little tiny screwdrivers, again, trying to get in and reach in little places. And this was something off of Thingiverse that you just put the little thing, it's got a little magnet in there to hold it. And now I can reach in there and get again, trying to get into little places. But there's a lot of cool things on 3D printing. The skulls take a long time to print. And again, we want, when we're doing 3D skulls, the reason we like Lindbergh so much, more so than like the old Bucky skulls and everything, is they were so lightweight. And you do still need to get inside of it. You know, I'm not a fan of Lindbergh's where the top is cut off. I'd rather have the back of the skull cut off because I hate that line right here. But, you know, you still have to have access. Even this guy, when he gets done, I'm only going to have him do two things. Again, he's steampunk, so I don't care if this mechanism is showing. So we're going to cut a hole. I'll cut a hole right here. And the outside of the servo will be shown. If you have Jarvis, my steampunk robot, you know, we kind of did something similar. But the bracket will come down and be out here. But to be able to get his eyes, I need access to be able to mount those eyes. So we're going to have to cut in, you know, a access panel in the back of his head so that we can get there. So, you know, Thingiverse, you need to have it, have it built strong enough that it holds together, but you don't want to make it too heavy. Miles does a great job. I couldn't do this without Miles. So thank you, Miles, very, very, very much for helping as he always does. Yeah, the big skeletons that we were able to get just for a year or two, they were bigger than the standard 5-footers. That Papa Voodoo is like 6.5 feet tall. And I'm kicking myself because I only bought the one, they were $100. And I only bought one for Papa Voodoo. And I'm kicking myself that I didn't buy a couple more extras because I love that great big one. Yes, Fright Props. I don't know if this had anything to do with it, but several years ago at Transworld, a bunch of us were sitting around in the bar after working all day, and I was sitting with a couple of the guys from Fright Props, and I was making this exact discussion about how I hate the heads cut off. I want them cut off in the back, and you know, I want the panel to slide in to mount on, and a year and a half later, they had their own skull that looked just like I said I wanted one. So don't know if it had anything, great minds think alike, or it had anything to do with it, but I am that they made it. How do you hide elbows in the joints with supports? Julian, I'm not quite sure what you're asking. How do you hide this joint here?
Costumes,
clothing, yeah. Usually what I'm going to do, again, it's going to have an aluminum bracket of some form around here to keep the clothing out of the elbows. This is the one that scares me the most. This isn't too hard to bracket off to keep the clothes out of the shoulder. This is the gear that I burned up. It was an elbow. So, you know, you have to be much more careful to be able to, you have to bracket this in and cover this. And I've used Tupperware, you know, cut Tupperware to fit. You know, you just have to it has to be able to move. But I've used Tupperware pieces before, and that's been really helpful. But again, and then clothing over the top of it to hide all that. Yeah, well, Skulltronics, I'm jealous. Jerry does a heck of a job over there. He has his bones made so all of this stuff is hidden in his bones. And he doesn't, you know, he uses stuff more this size, but it's all hidden in the bones. I am super jealous, always have been. Jerry makes a wonderful product. But yes, I've always been impressed by the way that he designed his skeletons to hide all of the mechanisms. One of these days, that's on my to-do list. You know, we'll make our own. But until then, I don't think they provide those molds. I don't think they're for sale. I think Jerry just makes them for him. I haven't seen that he makes those available to the general public. Yeah, that's almost you know, theme park again. If you choked a little bit on the price of these, if you really want to be impressed, Garner Holt Productions has the most realistic skulls heads, and I think they're in the 40s number of servos mechanisms inside the face. And I've been fortunate enough to be there with Garner and talk to him about them. They are really quiet. You know, one of the big things everybody's always says is, you know, servos, I'm sure you can hear that, you know, make noise. You just turn up the volume and everything, more screams and it covers it. But the servos he uses are really, really quiet. And I asked him, I said, Garner, how the heck do you do that? And he says, it's easy. And I said, no, it's not easy. I do it, you know, I've been doing this a long time. It's not easy to keep, you know, silence and quiet down servos. He says, yes, it is. It's very easy. You just pay $1,800 a servo times 45 servos per character. Do the math on that if you want to choke. 300 for a 3-axis. You probably could do that before. I don't know, the basic Monster Gut one was close to that, I think.
Yeah, I think Monster Guts is right around that price. They are currently out, and it's my understanding that he's working on a replacement, but I don't know how soon that is to come. The hardware is available. The problem apparently is the skulls.
And so Bob's is really the only commercially available, and that's 3D printed. Again, we were talking 3D printing. That's 3D printed. That's how his process is. But we're talking $700-800, Miles.
They run 600, and that's
okay.
yeah, and that's and he'll build them for you. You can build them yourself. He charges a little more if you build them yourself. So get them pre-built. And that's probably one of the most economical ones on the market right now. Fright Props does have a great one, but I think theirs run upwards of 600 to 1,000. But they do have a full 3-axis skull as well. It just kind of depends on the design. Again, Steve's board will control any of these skulls.
And there's also, if all you're doing is a 3-axis, you know, I love my controller. I mean, I'm a big fan. I put a lot of thought and work into these, as well as the guys at Adacore. But Haunt Hackers, you know, we're hoping Haunt Hackers will be up and running, you know, once this COVID thing is taken care of. And, you know, like the Banshee Junior, this guy is running, his head is running off a Banshee Junior. And the Banshee Junior has the audio board to run his jaw, and it controls random movement for the 3-axis skull. And it's simple, quick, easy to set up. It's like 5 minutes to set one of these things up. It's all push button. It talks you through, you know, how to set it up and run it. The Haunt Hacker stuff is super easy, especially for a 3-axis skull. Or if you just want a talking skull, the Wee Little Talker that he has for just the talking skull, fantastic little board. Again, you have to solder his boards up. They're DIY. But Haunt Hackers, you know, gosh, I really just hope that they're back up and providing product again soon, because, you know, they offer some tremendous products at very reasonable prices. Yeah. Okay. So you were just asking Huntington by Designs. That if I was just doing a 3-axis skull, probably the simplest. This is $70 because once you buy, if you're doing the system, you only buy the transmitter one time. Once you program them, you turn this away and put it in a box, and you're just running off of the $26 receiver boards. So, you know, once you buy the $70 system and you've got the transmitter, you know, each of these is $26.95, I think, without the discount. Yes. So that's probably and it comes pre-assembled. And again, if you wanted this one assembled, another $20. So $90. And I
believe the controller comes with one board, correct?
Comes with one receiver board that's already soldered. So once you're into this, and you just buy these, and these are pre-assembled. And then, so if you're doing a 3-axis skull, you know, it's $26 plus whatever that daughter board's going to be, that's going to provide the audio. So you've got that. A Banshee Junior for a 3-axis skull that includes the jaw circuit, does do audio. I don't know, $40 maybe to buy the stuff from Steve and then buy the parts.
I believe
40,
that's right. It's right in that ballpark, $40.
40-ish, 45-ish, something like that. For the wee little, or for the Banshee Junior. You don't need a Banshee. You need the Banshee Junior if you're just doing a single 3-axis skull. And then if you're just doing a jaw, wee little talker, more in the range of 30, 35-ish, something like that. Yeah, Julian, good luck. I'm still trying to make contacts as well for a mask because I want to take my masks up to the next level. You know, that means a foam inner skull or inner mask. It's really gets complicated. Silicone, it gets expensive. Again, you can spend $500 on a silicone mask. I spend a lot of time in the mask booths at Transworld. That's certainly on my to-do list. I've already got forms and everything that I've got and plans, but that's, you know, along in my progression.
How about talking about the wiring there that goes from the controller board to each servo real quick?
Okay, well, the servo, you know, a servo, whether it's a gearbox or, stay here, whether it's a gearbox like this or a regular servo, you know, that we're just using, we're not using gearboxes, just using regular servos in the head. You know, this has got like a foot-long cable. So usually that's the nice thing about having my servos here, my controllers here now. I have much shorter runs to here, but like the elbow, you can see this is a different color cable maybe. You know, I had to put a 12-inch extension on here, and then it just plugs into that upper portion of the board. But again, if you're having to do extensions, keep them as short as possible. Don't make them any longer than you have to. Make sure you get extensions, not servo cables. And make sure that you've got, when you get this kind of rotation here, you have to provide slack, you know, long enough cables here. In fact, this is almost pushing it. See, that's about the end of that, as tight as I want to get that to be able to have that rotation. So, you know, you have to add enough. With all of mine, you'll see up here, you know, they get a little bit of a loop, and then it all gets wire tied to keep it neat and keep it out of the gears. One really cool thing, and I did want to mention GoBuilda. One reason I do like GoBuilda is, if you can see, there is a big, huge hole in there. I have to drill my bracket, drill a hole here, but now the really cool thing is that all the wiring can go through here. So you can see this one here. This wire goes right through the body of that servo and comes out, so it keeps it away from these gears on the shoulders. One of the things I love, just love, see, they do not have that on the Actobotics. They're not big enough. They can't put that channel down the middle. So that's one thing that's super cool, to have that big panel there to be able to pass your wires through. I use the Cat 6 servo extender, the ones from Servo City, Julian. I've never had to push them that far, but I've played around with them and used them. Again, the way that I design my stuff, everything's integrated in the body. And again, I like when I set my yard up, everything goes out in the morning, and at the end of the night, everything comes in. Everything, all my animatronics come in. So I want these guys to be as standalone as possible. I'm usually on Halloween out until 1 or 2 o'clock. It started at 4 o'clock in the morning, setting up, and usually finally get in to have a beer before bed around 1 o'clock, between 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. So I like all my props integrated, separate. You know, I just put them on a roller dolly and roll them into the backyard and set them down under cover and, you know, away. So, you know, that's part of the reason I designed mine. And again, a lot of these, you know, if I'm doing a local convention, you know, they'll come with me to a convention, or, you know, like this guy, he gets broken down and packed away in my suitcase. and he's made it, I think, 2 or 3 trans worlds. He gets to stay home this year. I'm going to take one of the Go Build the guys this next year. So, oh, okay, that's you, Miles. That's a super secret site. Make sure to go and see that link that Miles. There used to be a really good site that showed lengths of all the body parts and how long to make them, and that I lost it, couldn't find it even on the Wayback Machine. This is the one I use now. The thing is, I think it's in centimeters if I remember. So, you know, this guy is not 12 feet tall, but I think that those dimensions are in centimeters. Are we good? Anything else before we close it up, guys? Any questions? Yeah, again, if you guys want to, again, I recommend, you know, if you're not already subscribed to the website, again, I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Sometimes I post stuff there, progress pictures and stuff that I don't post anywhere else. So you get to see some stuff. But definitely go over and like the DIY Animatronics page on Facebook and join the group. Now, if you're going to join the group, I will tell you right now, it requires you to answer 3 questions. They are simple questions, but it is a test. So if you can't read and answer 3 simple questions, you can't figure out animatronics. But Miles is not going to let you approve your joining the group unless you answer those 3 questions. So please answer the 3 questions. You know, that's a wonderful place to collaborate with people and get information. And show off the stuff you build. You know, we want to see what you build too. So I hope that this encouraged you to be a little more interested and enthusiastic about you being able to, you know, build something like this. They can look intimidating, like so many other things when you look at it right, you know, all in one piece. But when you break it down into little pieces, that's how I do it. You know, there's a lot of times I'll sit with a project for a month before I get started, because it's just like, it's so overwhelming, and I'm, you know, I'm doing things that I don't know how to do. And, you know, sometimes all it takes is for me to order something, and even with this guy, when I started on him, it was like, this is going to be a big project, 2 characters working together, and there's a lot of working parts. And so what I did is I just went out and made these brackets. I had to make 4 of these brackets. I just went outside, you know, into my shop and cut and drilled and that was the first thing I did. It's like, all right, now I'm going, you know, and it kind of snowballs from there. But for me, at least, it's making that first step. Once I get started on something, you know, then it's like, oh, well, you know, I got a half an hour. I'll go work on something else and do another little piece. And that's the beauty of working all winter long on these things. You know, you don't make one of these for your first time in September. I've had people call me in September and say, oh, I want you to help me do this. It's like, well, that's great, because we got a year and 2 months to get it done, because we're not going to get it done for this year. Don't forget, the discount on Adacore if you want to get into that system. If you look at the people that I promote, I love working with Adacore. They're here in San Diego, you know, so I can go drive to the shop. You know, it's wonderful to be able to call somebody or send an email to somebody and get a response, or be able to talk with them, you know, within 3-hour time zone, depending on what coast you're on. You know, same thing with Fright Props, Servo City. You know, those companies are all very responsive and helpful. The tutorials on Fright Props are, if you haven't looked at that, really should go look at that. I really recommend, you know, these guys. But if you've got any questions, you know, if you want to get lost in some of my videos, go over there. Like I said, there's almost 150 over there, plus links to some of the guys that you know, I'm a big fan of. You know, great stuff to be doing if you're locked down for COVID. Okay. Yeah, that hat is, I could have sold that hat many times at various conventions. And actually now I've seen a couple others out there that, that mimic that. It's like, I don't have the only one anymore, but it was fun for a while. All right. Thank you again to Miles for his help tonight. And as always, I couldn't do these without his help. And thank you guys all for joining in. Stay in touch. Come visit with us on the forums or on the YouTube or on the Facebook pages, and post what you're building, because I'd sure love to see it. All right, guys, I think we're going to call it a night. All right, take care. Go build something. Good night.